Hello, and welcome to another show of The Humble Hang, a series where we try to make sense of what's changing, why it matters, and what comes next. I am sitting with my friend, the incomparable Ritesh Patel. How are you?
Very well, sir. How are you? It's been a interesting day already, and here we are in the studio again.
We are in the studio. It's always good to hang with you. We had a lot of really great response on the wearables conversation that we had, and you were dropping some knowledge. Today we are talking about hearables, which is a word that kind of sounds made up. It's like someone took wearables and moved it a little bit north and called it innovation. But I'm learning that hearables is actually the largest category of wearables, which I was today years old when I found that out. Tell us a little bit about hearables.
Yeah, it's a big market, right? I mean, we were talking earlier before we got online here. You've got it in three categories, really. You've got what's being termed as smart augmentation, which is earphones that basically do things like take out stuff from the real world, um, screeches, background noise, and increasingly, increase the volume of the speech that you're hearing. You've got those biometric monitoring guys who are now coming in saying, aha, we can do stuff with the ear. And what we need to do is figure out what we can do. And so they're looking at things like EEG and pulse and blood pressure and all those things. And then you've got that massive category of the destigmatization of health ear hearing aids, right? The FDA deregulated that industry last year. Over the counter, you can now get all sorts of hearing aids. So a whole bunch of companies are getting into that market, increasingly making them smaller and smaller. But all of those are doing things to help with your hearing and then track your health while you're hearing, which is fascinating to me.
I'm super interested in this because I don't think an average person thinks about hearable, A, the word hearables, but B, like it's just handing my earbuds for a call or to listen to some music or to go work out. But it seems like a category that, from an augmentation standpoint, say first, is collapsing itself because we're talking about hear assistance, hear protection, live language translation, and other things within that category that makes the ear. Are we buying earbuds anymore?
That's a great question. And maybe they're not earbuds, right? Maybe they're just hearing, products of varieties that do what you want them to do and personalize for you. For example, I think Bose was one of the original pioneers of this stuff. When they started doing things like focused hearing, or you can now just watch the TV and listen to the TV. And then all of a sudden, people like Apple and Samsung got into the business as well. I mean, Apple probably is the leader in all this, right? They've got those earbuds now, the pros, where you can actually it acts as a hearing aid. You can do live translation of language. Imagine that, somebody speaking to you and you can hear the English version of the Spanish person who's talking to you and that sort of thing. So Samsung's doing it with their Galaxy Buds Pro, and you've got new companies, Anchor, Subtle, and I think Time Kettle is another one that's doing these interesting things with these headphones where they can augment them with services, as I call them, translation services, enhanced hearing services, canceling out noises in the background services, right? So that's what's happening in that augmentation space, is adding new feature functions to the buds that are sitting in your ear.
I think what's interesting is what you're talking about. I think is like what you're describing is programmable hearing, right? Like there's categories of overlapping sounds that allows you in this space to increase or decrease what the environment is telling you to help you focus or concentrate or be on a call. And noise canceling turns the volume down, but what happens when it lets you turn parts of your world up is a really interesting way to think about this from a really practical and even workplace perspective, right?
Exactly. Everybody, I've been on more calls lately, or, Zoom calls, that sort of thing, where invariably somebody's wearing mainly AirPods, right? They're using those as their day to day. But imagine once you finish that call, you're now talking to somebody at another office around the world, and you can use those headphones to translate languages, right? Don't need subtitles and say an interpreter, for example, things like that. So it's fascinating time to be, where the combination of the software and hardware is allowing you to customize hearing. using these normal run-of-the-mill consumer things that were originally used to listen to music primarily.
Yeah. Yeah. Which leads me to believe that if Dre gets back into the business, we should all invest again, since he's already proving that.
That's right. I forgot about Beats. Yeah.
Shame on me. Talk about biometric monitoring, because I didn't, I didn't realize, obviously, as a non-healthcare expert, but like that the ear is a serious health sensing location too. What can you tell us about like what the research says of what our bodies are doing with our ears, which is not, just listening, right?
Yeah. So, there was a bunch of scientists who started looking into this a while ago and figured out that actually, if you've always got that in your ear, there is an ability to create the capability of sensing biometric signals that your body's giving out through the ear canal, right? So the first one I think that everybody goes to is EEG and EKG, right? EEG, your brain waves close to the brain. I can now detect signals. And there's lots of companies that tried that. But the big ones really, or the one that's doing really well, I think there's two. There's a company called Aware. They've been in it for a while. They have EEG, EKG, I think blood oxygen, pulse rate, blood pressure, respiratory, all of the things that can be. Oh, sorry.
I mean, that's a little cliche. Phone ringing here. Look, we're live. It's really happening.
Yeah.
I think you're right, though. I think it's really interesting that we can think about the in-ear heart rate, or devices that are blood oxygen saturation. I mean, this is like really complex stuff coming from something, that I listen to Bruce Springsteen on normally, right? So, exactly. Are there? I think you mentioned a company called Next Sense too.
Yeah, so that was incubated at Google X, right? And they created these smart buds that basically are clinical grade EEG sensors in them. And rather than sort of using your ring or your watch, what they do is they actively track your brain waves, and then they play something to calm you down, right? So that's their whole philosophy: is use Next Sense, put them in your ears when you go to sleep or are about to go to sleep. The brain waves will be detected by these Next Sense buds, and then it'll start playing whatever calming music or noise that you need to calm your brain down, and it'll keep track of your EEG as you're sleeping to make sure that you keep sleeping, right? That's the promise. I haven't seen them. Sorry, I haven't played with them yet. I've seen the videos, and I've heard a couple of people using them, and they say it seems to work. But it's an interesting use of headphones where the only thing that they're doing is really helping you sleep by tracking your brain waves and playing something that interacts with your brain to calm your brain down, right? Because a lot of people say I can't sleep because my mind is on the whole time.
Yeah.
And this Next Sense thing is about that. There's Oslo, which is another one similar to that. Again, biometric sensing in the ear, and then basically doing the same thing, giving you either noise, white noise, or some sort of music to help your brain calm down, right? And don't forget, people like Apple, Samsung, and Google, they'll be all over this as well once this is figured out. So, but I think the big one is Aware. Aware is basically doing everything the Ring does, but through your ear canal.
So what is what you're talking about, like multimodal health monitoring, effectively?
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at Aware, it's doing a lot of things that your Aura Ring or your Apple Watch does, but it does it in the earbuds. And it allows you to play music as well. So you can listen to music while you're doing that stuff, right? So it's very passive, similar to the Ring and the Watch. The other ones are specific use cases. So again, you can have your watch tracking things, your ring tracking things, and then maybe, the Next Sense earbuds making sure your brain's okay. So you're looking after your brain, your blood pressure, your heart rate, your steps, all of those things. So you can have all three. You have the watch, the ring, and the earbuds, and now your whole body's covered, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think what's interesting too is, well, there's two things. One is the combination of the things that you're describing, existing features and future promises, right, are not only useful in fitness, but occupational safety, sleep, as you mentioned, elder care, and then we'll get into clinical in a minute. But like, there's all these categorical use cases. The thing that I'm fascinated by is that, as you mentioned, companies like Apple and Samsung, just as two examples, like, how are people still getting into this business when the foundational competition has nearly limitless cash on hand to crush you, right?
Yeah. So look, if I was going to do this, right, there's a number of ways you could go. There's only one player right now that is basically doing all of things, right? EEG, EKG, blood pressure, all of that stuff, right? Which is what the rings and the watches are promising, and the patches and the wearables are promising. The others are single use cases, right? One is around sleep. I will manage your sleep by giving you the ability to have these earbuds do something that calms your brain down. There's a couple of those going on, right? But if you look at someone like an Apple or a Samsung, in my belief is, they'll do a little bit more every year. They'll add one more feature function. Right now, Apple has the translator and the audio augmentation, where I can use it as a hearing aid without any stigma, right? I'm sure they're looking at the health platform, because they're in the platform place. Samsung and Google the same way. But there's a market for all of this. If I can track things through the ear, I can do specific use cases. Some athletes may just want earbuds to listen to music while they're running, but also track their heart rate only.
I think
That's a big business all on its own.
it's a huge business, but it also, like, the things that you're describing are reducing the smartphone's role as our primary interface. So interfaces in the wearables category, but in particular hearables, that understands speech and translates language and delivers AI assistance and verifies all these things and can, detect biorhythms. Like, so the engine is the smartphone, but the device is actually doing the work, which is an interesting kind of redrawing of maps, so to speak, right?
Exactly. And maybe the smartphone just becomes the collection place, right?
Yeah.
So it just collects the data, it doesn't do anything else. And then what do you do with that data? I think the big thing here, if you look at the wearables, the hearables, and other things that are coming into the market, it's shifting the model where it is allowing us as people to take a lot more control of our healthcare with these kinds of data sets. If like 10 years ago, you'd have to go to the doctor to get your heart rate or your EEG or your EKG. I have the Alive Core handheld 6-lead EKG, EKG that I use. I don't need to go to the cardiologist every day or every 6 weeks or every month, right? I've got it at home now. And I think that's where this is really shifting that whole healthcare business, where we're becoming more in charge of our own healthcare rather than relying on the healthcare facilities and the people within those facilities to tell us what our EKG was and why it's so bad.
Sure. Sure. That makes sense. I think, do you, as you think about, the executives that you talk to and companies that you talk to, do you think about continuous listening as a privacy and trust challenge? I remember when the Amazon Alexa first came out, and there was like a whole bunch of, like, a movement, like, I don't trust that device, she's listening. I've given up on any of that, because I just assume that I'm being recorded at any given moment. But like, how do you account for that as you either build or scale these companies, and how do you convince consumers that this is really net positive and not something that we should be?
Yeah, I mean, look, the privacy issue is a big one. Just to give you an idea, after our last wearables call that we had, and this, we did, my feed on Facebook has been full of wearable ads. So it is definitely listening for sure. I, I think there's a balance in the companies that, like the Apples of this world, who do put a lot of effort into their brand about privacy and trust, are the ones that will win at the end of the day. The market is getting very crowded. And so, to your point, those people who can collect the data, give me clinical grade data, but also protect me and my data, I think will win in the long term. Short term, there's going to be some chaos. But I think long term, we as humans will figure out this is the brand I can trust, and it'll keep me, keep my stuff secret. I'm not sure about these guys, right? So
Yeah.
it's a natural evolution of what we'll have to go through.
I love that. One thing that we talked about too, stay on Apple for a second, because I think you're on the board of AFA, the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, and talk to me about things uh, in this category that may help children, potentially allergies in that category, because I think it's sometimes overlooked in terms of a broader market, but it affects millions of people, or 1 in 4, depending on kind of what category of major allergens
Yeah.
that people suffer from.
There's a couple of companies I've met in the last couple of months. One is using the earbuds really for detection of an asthma attack, right? Because they can detect your breathing through the ear. So, is there an algorithm we can create where we can see that this person is potentially going to have an asthma attack? Because once the attack happens, you've got to get that inhaler very quickly, or get to the hospital very quickly. If you don't, if you even if the inhaler doesn't work, and people can die. So it's fascinating to see, as I said, those individual use cases that I was talking about, and one of those could be around the detection of an early stage asthma attack. Not sure how far that company will go. There's a lot of data they need to do that. There's a lot of, pulmonologists I'm sure they're talking to. The other one that's fascinating for me was from our past conversation about wearables, is particularly with kids with food allergies, right? It's a company that's created a band with a QR code on it. So if you're sending your kid to a play date or a camp or whatever, they can just simply either tap the band, it's got NFC, that pops up everything the kid is allergic to, or scan the QR code and it'll pop up a little thing that says, this person is allergic to the following things. I think things like that are really fascinating and would change a child's life, right? Because they can do a lot more things without having to remember to tell the mother whose play date you're going to that, by the way, I'm allergic to, peanuts, tree nuts, and all this sort of stuff. It takes the stigma away as well. You just tap the band, right?
It's amazing. I think what's so great about this conversation, and thank you, is that there's a lot of takeaways, but the biggest one is like the collapsing of this category from earbuds into kind of one category with different kind of feature sets across those, and how we think about now ear health and programmable perception as the new words that we need to get into our vocabulary, and how accessibility in particular becomes now embedded in everyday infrastructure because this technology is so amazing and important. What do you have as a closing thought on a thesis of kind of where we go in this
So
area?
So connected health has been that holy grail for many, many years, since I got into the healthcare industry in 2010. And connected health back then was really, how do we use the smartphone to augment whatever we're doing? And you hurtle forward 15 years now, 16 years, and we've got a plethora of items that are connecting all manner of things on our body to collect that data, right? So I think we're getting to that stage where connected health is finally becoming achievable with these things. And you can have devices like patches and rings and watches and earbuds and the handheld EKGs. I've seen a handheld Bluetooth, a cuff, a Bluetooth cuff for blood pressure that's becoming clinical grade. I've seen stethoscopes. Keiko has that stethoscope, the handheld stethoscope. You've got handheld, Butterfly has the handheld device. All sorts of things are coming into the marketplace, miniaturizing them, making them affordable for this connected care continuum. The question I have is, we consumers are adopting these things, but when will healthcare professionals start adopting these things, right? When will a cardiologist have the 6-lead AliveCore EKG reader in their pocket, or the nurse, instead of you having to be wheeled down and stuff stuck on your chest
Yeah.
everywhere? And I know AliveCore's got a 12-lead one as well, I think, right?
Mm.
So I think the adoption rate and the cost factor involved in getting the healthcare professionals to adopt some of these things may be a little bit further away. But it does change the paradigm, as I said earlier. We are now in charge of our health and well-being a lot more. And the data that doctors used to rely on to tell us how well or badly we were doing, we're now getting it into our smartphones primarily.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and not the least of which is making it accessible across underserved communities, and communities really where this type of technology would have outsized value compared to others. That's great. Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about that, right? Are we
yeah,
in danger of creating a dual, the haves and the have-nots digital health world, right? And I think right now we probably are, but I think again, depending on how things go, and if we can prove the value of these things, then things will get covered, and people will have access to some of these things from a digital perspective. But I think it's incumbent on all of us in this industry to ensure that when we're building these things out, we're not creating that two-person divide: the haves who can afford all this stuff and the have-nots who cannot. We should always think about everyone and how do we deploy this to everyone who could benefit from it.
I love that. Well, thanks again for another humble hang. It's always great hanging with you. This has been an awesome conversation. You can check us out on humblehang.com and we're on LinkedIn as well. And I will challenge us because this is really intellectually curious. Can we next time endeavor to talk about seeables? Is that a thing? Is that a word? I don't know if seeables.
Maybe we can coin it, right? But yeah, there's a whole new movement using glasses,
Yeah.
and what can we do with the glasses? So yeah, let's go for it. We'll figure it out, I'm sure.
All right, next one, seeables. All right, thank you. We'll do this again.
Thanks, Tim.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.